Bring on the playoffs. Here we go. Norwich City against Leeds United. First leg at Carrow Road this Sunday. It's remarkable that we are here. And after a 46-game marathon, you get propelled into what hopefully one of these teams, well, definitely one of these teams will have a 3-game sprint. The question is which team? And I'm delighted to be joined by Leeds fam, sure, recognisable face to so many, known obviously as Away Days on YouTube. Ellis, thank you so much for joining us. I mean, we were beginning to get into a conversation just before I hit record, but it's interesting, isn't it, kind of taking the temperature of how both Norwich fans and Leeds fans are feeling ahead of this game, because I don't think there's a huge amount of confidence in either fan base at the moment.
Well, we've been scarred of we've never won the playoffs. We've also never won a playoff tie with a second leg is at Ellen Road, which is the advantage, especially the advantage of it being at home, because we're such a Ellen Road will either win you or lose you a game. And I think Phil Hayes, our local journalist, the other day, is within the first 10 minutes of that game at Carrow Road, you'll know. And you just do with Leeds, you'll know within the first 10 minutes. I don't know. I feel like Norwich, from my perspective, outwardly would probably have rather get Southampton. They feel like all the 4 teams don't feel particularly in form, but of the 4, I feel like Southampton have to go away to us and win on the final day of the season. Although obviously we were sort of a nothing game, really. They probably feel the most confident going into it. You lost to Birmingham, obviously we lost to Saints. Yeah, I don't know. It feels. I know obviously there's so cliche in the playoffs of the lottery, but it does feel so. It could be any one of the 4, really.
Yeah, it does. And again, we were sort of speaking about this before, because you were making the case that actually it's probably a good thing that Norwich City have got Leeds United. Actually, a lot of Norwich fans probably were saying, heading into that final day against Birmingham, Norwich need to win that game in order to ensure that they have Southampton and Russell Martin. So it's interesting that from a Leeds perspective, you feel that there's maybe areas that can be got at in these 2 legs.
Well, there's not. The Leeds are falling apart again, Sean, is a thing, because we'll either sail through against you, which for us, right, our confidence feels like it's been knocked massively since that international break. Whether that's because Wales lost and in qualifying, our score, spine of our side is Welsh, or there's Jorginho had an operation just before the international break and hasn't looked the same player since, and everything has gone through him. Dan James with a cracked rib, it's such a good option to start up from the bench. So things like that haven't helped us. Pascal Strug has been out for a while now, and Ampadu Rogot has began to look a bit shaky the last few weeks. But it's just, we'll either sail through, confidence will be at all-time high, and if we beat you, I think we go up, because I think what we need is the confidence again, and nothing can restore confidence like going through a playoff semi-final. But also, it wouldn't surprise me if we're 3-0 down at Carrow Road. It's been so ridiculously topsy-turvy with us this season, which feels weird to say when we've got 90 points. But it's also a fan base that is beginning to be a bit questionable of the manager. So it's what do you do? Because it's probably the strongest side the Championship has ever seen, ours or Leicester's. And if we don't go up, it's an abject failure for what it does for the future of the club as well. It would be a disaster.
Well, that was what I was going to ask you, because obviously Daniel Farke, a manager that we know well in these parts, obviously for what he's achieved, 2 titles, so 2 relegation, well, 1 relegation and 1 that he was a part of. What has happened? I guess you've touched upon some of the themes, but looking from afar, like you said before that international break, I think there was even talk of you guys who just beaten Leicester potentially going on to winning the league, and it just hasn't happened. What are the reasons for where you are at this moment in time?
Well, we went on a 10-game winning run, which was mental, which we obviously knew was going to come to an end at some point. And then we just haven't gotten over the line. And Farke has used the excuse, quite worryingly, of being Ipswich, if I had someone like Sam Morsey. No one at the start of the season wanted Sam Morsey and Luongo as their midfielder too. It's just because McKenna's done a really good job. You would rather Glenn Kamara and Ethan Ampadu and Archie Gray and Ilya Gruev as your options in midfield. It was a mental thing to say. And the suggestion that we don't have an experienced squad, and we've got players who have gone to major tournaments with Wales, Bamford, Cooper, who are in the squad still, went up with us last time. It feels like a man who's maybe beginning to crack a little bit, is my concern. And I don't particularly know what's happened. There's maybe an over-reliance on Somerville, which is worrying if he's already agreed to move. We don't know, obviously it's hearsay, but whether we go up or not, the concern for me is Somerville knows he's going to be in the Premier League anyway. So how do you fire a player up for that? Hopefully he doesn't need firing up and it'll be fine. But I don't know. I'm really concerned by how it's fallen off a cliff. But I also feel like any stadium in the world that can lift a side for a second leg would be Ellen Road. Although historically, I remember in Bielsa's first season when we had Norwich at home, and it was a huge day. And we tried lifting that, and I think was it Vrancic scored a free kick really early. I was like, that is the most Leeds way that could have happened. So I think it's just a bit of no plan B with Farke. Is what I think. There isn't really a plan B, and the plan B tends to be just throw on these attackers he's got at his disposal, and it never really works. And it also comes quite late. Like I don't think he's ever made a sub at half time in his life. There's never where it was like we went from Bielsa, where he'd make a sub in 20 minutes if he needed to a manager who is so, even like a QPR game at 2-0 down at half time and it wasn't working, just didn't change it, and we needed to go out and win it. And stuff like that does concern me. But also, I think the playoffs comes down to moments players, and we've got the most moments players in the playoffs by far. The fact we have an Italian international, one of the best young wingers outside of the Premier League, and also a good finisher in Joe Perot. But we've also got Jorginho Rutter, who was a £30 million player. And if he can find his form again, that's enough to get you through it. But it just depends whether they can find that form again.
It's interesting because I think a lot of what you said there about Daniel Farke, a lot of Norwich fans will see similarities with it. I remember his substitutions in particular being a massive conversation, particularly during those Premier League campaigns where Norwich did struggle. What's the relationship with him been like throughout this season? Because it, as you said, topsy-turvy. It feels like it's been a little bit up and down with him. How's he kind of done, and how do the Leeds fans view him going into these playoffs?
I think he's sort of got a bit of a free hit because of the fact he had to deal with so much rubbish. Like the sort of season started, you had Sinister and Adams threatening legal action against the club, who were two players who we probably thought were going to stay. You had Gnonto on the day of the West Brom game said he'd never want to play for the club again. Like he's actually had to deal with a lot of squad churn, a lot of weird financial stuff to navigate when you go down with the squad that we had. Like we have obviously spent on Joe Perot, was the biggest signing we've made, and obviously that maybe hasn't worked out the way we wanted it to, but he has to deal with a lot of nonsense early in the season, which he's then used as rationale for us missing out. He said if we'd have had a more competent first couple of months, but then I feel like that's once again worrying because I feel like he's leaning on his free hit when the reality is it was in our hands 4 games ago. So both things can be true, that we haven't got over the line. And also there's this big thing, well, he gets you out of the league, but he's never done it in the playoffs. Like he's done it, he did it automatically twice with you guys. So I don't know how I see him navigating the playoffs. I think, like I said, the first 10 minutes are going to tell massively what happens, because if you go to Ellen Road with even a draw, that stadium is going to be so nervy, it's untrue. And it won't be, for me, from my experience, it's the most, obviously for my job, I go to a different football stadium every week. There's no stadium like it. It will win you or lose you again. It just will. And I just want to see Leeds at Wembley.
I was going to say. I was going to say in terms of Leeds, have you seen them at Wembley? I know that the playoff history's been a little bit. No, it's not been great, has it? I remember that derby one a few years ago with Frank Lampard. But have you as a club been to Wembley relatively recently? Unless I'm missing one off my head.
We went in 2008 against Doncaster and lost 1-0. But I wasn't. My family couldn't afford to go at the time, so it was like this is like my like. I'm like, oh, I'm ready to go all in. If we get to Wembley, I'm ready to go all in. But I feel like if I was a Norwich fan, I wouldn't be looking at it being. There is clearly a golfing class in the two sides. There just is. The thing I will say is that both times we played you this season, I don't think we were particularly good value for our 3 points. Like the away game, obviously we just won because it was the one game that worked with Farke for and everyone. And then the game at Ellen Road was it Bamford who scored. And
yes,
I remember you guys had a lot of the ball, but didn't really do much. But I don't think you had Sargent at the time, and you're a completely different side with Sargent. And we haven't played you with Sargent. So that'll be interesting to see. I think I've heard talk of Gabby Sarr is going to move to the 10 for this one, which I think actually benefits us because I think Gruev can nullify him there. But we'll see. But I don't know. It's all hearsay for the ball's kicked, isn't it?
I mean, yeah, it is, and it's interesting you mentioned the golfing quality because there's a Norwich account that called NCFC Numbers that has calculated 17 points between the two teams. It's the biggest points differential between two teams in the playoffs in history, which is remarkable. I can see your face at that statistic, but as you said, it's difficult because, and David Wagner has played on this a little bit. He feels that Leeds are going into this game as favourites. So is that something that you as a club are going to have to deal with, and Daniel Farke and the squad are going to have to deal with as well?
I think the problem is there's no hiding from it. Every game we've gone into this season, we should be favourites because of the squad we have. It's just the reality of it. And It's also interesting that once again he's doing what Farke did, and he's leading on an excuse already before the game's even kicked off. It feels weird. It's a weird one, this one, from like, obviously because I can literally see Carrow Road from where I live. It doesn't feel like anyone is overly keen on Wagner either. So it's like the potential for both fan bases to turn during this tie is fantastic. Like, at least from a neutral perspective, you're going to see some form of fume. But I feel like also about 3 months ago, if you'd have said Norwich are going to finish 5th or 6th, you'd have been bemused by that turn of events. So it's really, really weird that you have put in a nice run. I think it's, like I said, it's coincided with Sargent returning. I think, has Nunez had a decent 2024 so far, which didn't really seem to be coming from anywhere. Sarah's obviously fantastic. I think, like, if we do go up, I'd love him. So I think most clubs outside of like the big 6 in England probably would. So it's, and Johnny Rowe is fantastic as well. You've got him back flying. So I don't know. Like I said, if we can just get out of Carrow Road with a 1-goal cushion, then I think we'll go to Wembley. It's just if we have to go to Ellen Road with any nerves, then it's a big problem. Although we went back to Ellen Road against Derby in 2019 with a 1-goal cushion and still lost. So what a mate, yeah.
That's the playoffs, though, isn't it? And we know we all know what it's like. But it is interesting again the perception of it, because I think Norwich fans are going. You don't want to go to Ellen Road being behind. The view is that Norwich need to be ahead going into that second leg. So it sounds like from your perspective, you feel like Leeds need to be ahead as well, which makes that first leg all the more interesting for both teams, but also the potential for it to be really cagey, right?
Yeah, I think so. And the thing is, we've always done well against, like, you see the fact we did the double over Leicester, comfortably did the double over Ipswich. Like, and obviously the away game was 4-3, but we battered them at Ellen Road. Any team that comes to try and play against us will lose. Like, it's just happened all season. Southampton are the slight difference to that. The difference being we played them one when the squad wasn't. It was that weird part of the start of the season. And secondly, we had to just go for it at the weekend. Concerningly, we didn't really look very good either when we were doing that. But any team that's had to play against us, so we go in with a lead. We've been terrible against a low block. So if Norwich can come to Ellen Road with a lead and can sit in and try and frustrate us, then it's a problem, because it will be so hard for us to break that down, because we don't have a fit Jorginho. And then other than that, we didn't sign a 10. We've got no number 10 at the club. So there's no one that's going to unlock a door. It's not like a Pablo Hernandez we had or an Emi Buendia that you had to unlock anything. Like, it's just a case of, we just have the better attackers give the ball to Somerville, give the ball to Gnonto, and hope something happens, which admittedly is a joke that I can say that in the Championship, that we've got them to as options. But it's just, it's Leeds United in the playoffs. It just doesn't end well. It just doesn't. And like some clubs, it's just that simple. And it's annoying for me that it had to be Norwich. Like, I wore a Leeds shirt to the gym this morning, and the looks, because I wear a Leeds shirt to the gym every day. You know what I mean? Like, it's not, and I get the looks, but like the looks have started now. It's, for God's sake, of course.
Well, that was going to be one of my questions, because you mentioned it earlier. You're in Norfolk. You can basically see Carrow Road from your window. What is this tie like, being a Leeds United fan in Norfolk at this point?
I just know that I'm just going to get peppered if it doesn't go well for us. But I do think I've had this feeling all season that we'll go up at Wembley. I've just had it all season. Like, in fact, I actually messaged the person I'm sorting my Wembley thing out through in October, saying, just to make sure, can I reserve this thing for October? Like, I sent the message in October saying, because I think we're going to go to Wembley. But, you know, it doesn't change anything. I didn't think Norwich would get the playoffs. I thought 4 weeks ago we were going to go up as champions. So it doesn't, goalposts move during the season, and ours just came back about 5 steps. But like I said, we've got an 8-day gap between the 2 games now to regroup. And if Farke can't get the squad up for this, then I don't see how he's the man for the job, basically.
Well, yeah, and again, I don't want to bring you into a negative hypothetical space, but if Norwich City do progress and Leeds United are playing Championship football next season, what does that mean for Daniel Farke? Is it difficult to then envisage him getting a second year at the club?
He was brought in initially in the conversations where it'll be a 2-year plan, but for me, I've seen enough now. I've seen enough, and I think if we don't go up, we do go up, I think it's not long term. I don't see it as a long term fit, and no one should listen to me seriously in a serious footballing conversation about that. But like, I just think the lack of plan B is concerning. The persistence to stick with a 4-2-3-1, even in games where it doesn't warrant it. For example, Southampton at the weekend just passed through our 2 in the midfield. We haven't scored. A centre midfielder hasn't scored all season for us. Like not one goal from centre midfield all season, and which would you'd think would mean we've got a really robust midfield pairing in Gruev and Kamara, but you didn't see that on Saturday either. So I don't know what is going on. But the players, it doesn't feel like he's lost the dressing room or anything like that. There's no murmurs of that. So it could just be a blip. And blips happen all the time. Southampton had one a couple of months ago. And Leicester had a huge blip and still went up. So it's all about if we can just get over the blip. It's just this, the one fan base in the country like that are going to be negative before a ball's even kicked is Leeds. And I had this conversation with Leeds fans all the time. I think we lose the club games sometimes. And I know it's pathetic to think you can have that impact, but I think it does. Like the players can feel it. Like the loss against Blackburn the other day, we went 1-0 down and the stadium just went. Like the stadium went. It just completely went. Whereas on the flip side of that, when we beat Leicester 3-1, when we equalised, I turned to the people around me and said, we're going to win this now. It just feels like that sometimes Adam Rowe can suck the ball in. And from a Norwich perspective, if you feel that in the second leg, I would be very concerned because it just sometimes it feels like a matter of time before we score. And I don't know, but I feel like if Norwich can go in with a 1 or 2 goal cushion, I find it very unlikely we come back at Ellen Road.
Interesting, really interesting. One thing that I was going to ask you, almost to put the Norwich baseball cap on and grow yourself a nice beard and pretend to be David Wagner for a moment. But where are the vulnerabilities in this Leeds team? How should Norwich City approach this game? It was interesting what you said about the low block and maybe the transitional side to it. But if you were trying to set up a team to beat Leeds United, how would you set them up?
You just have to double up on the wingers. Realistically, double up on the wingers, which is easier said than done because you've got a really good finisher in Joel Perot who's going to have to start because Bamford's injured. And Jorginho is fantastic at finding space when he's Jorginho. The playing through, you can play for our press in 2 or 3 passes sometimes. Like it's that simple to do. And if you've got someone like Johnny Rowe on the break who can expose a Firpo or I really hope Connor Roberts starts just for many reasons, but I feel like Archie Gray I'd like in the middle this week. I feel like if you're going to play him, although his head was very down at the weekend, and I actually saw Connor Roberts go over to him and have to tell him to realise the playoffs are still a thing, which is hard when you've got a young squad. I just think low block is the key to beating us. Just play a low block, which I think Wagner has been doing, and Norwich fans have been frustrated by that. But it could be this: the key to beating us is just play a low block and frustrate us, because we really struggled to play through it. You saw it the other day against Southampton. The amount of times we got out wide to the box and just wouldn't cross it because there was no target man. So I think playing a low block and hitting us in transition is the key. It's just whether you can do it. If we go 1-0 up within the first 10, it's going to be. I'll be very confident of us putting 2 or 3 past you. But it's the first 10 minutes. Everything. It's everything.
Yeah, and that's player football as well, isn't it? And just to finish before we sort of get on to how you see the game going, but the end of the season for Leeds, which I think 4 defeats in 6, wasn't it? How big of a risk is that it becomes difficult? Because it's interesting because Wagner and Norwich haven't had a great run. I think they've won 1 in 6, and there's been probably more draws than defeats in that spell, to be fair. But he sort of set off the game very bullishly. Look, momentum doesn't matter, and obviously he's won it with Huddersfield, and his Huddersfield team I think won 3 of their last 10 and still went up. So these urban myths that I think we all take into the playoffs about momentum and form. How much do they really matter? It's a difficult one, isn't it, for every fan base to gauge?
Yeah, I don't believe momentum in the playoffs. And it's also like, the team that finishes sneaks in at 6th. It's like, no, statistically, the team that finishes 3rd goes up because it finished 3rd across the season. I don't really read too much into it. My concern is actually, as I'm going to moan about superstitions here and then talk about one, but the only team we did the double over the season was you. The only team we did the double over in the playoffs last time was Derby, and then we lost to them. But my point is, like, Derby had moments players. You had someone like Mason Mount in that Derby side. You obviously got Gabby Sarr and Josh Sargent who are very good, and so is Johnny Rowe, but no one of the quality of like a mate. In fact, they had Mason Mount at the Championship was a joke in the first place anyway, comparatively to what we had at the time. I just think we've got them players that win you a playoff tie, even if they are playing for a badge, which is seemingly cursed in the competition.
Which lends me very nicely to how, and we'll start with the first leg and then maybe we'll broaden it out. But that first leg at Carrow Road, what sort of game do you expect? Are you expecting, and how do you think it will go?
The first, Norwich start on the front foot, I presume. Like it just feels like that's obviously going to happen. Like on the Wall City will be sung for the first of 20 times, and then they will start on the front foot. And I mean, I've got a ticket in the Leeds end, I think, so I will be watching through my hands the whole game. But like I said, you found the recipe to beat us the first game at Carrow Road. The first four, I know we had a few chances, but I think it's going to be, I don't see it being cagey. I think it's going to be a really open affair, which is really fun for a neutral, but not us. But it also feels like, it feels weird for me. You can completely correct me for this, but it feels like Norwich maybe, I think you would have expected to be in the top 6 this season. I think that would have been the aim, but I don't think Norwich fans would have been necessarily going with the 3 that came down and the money they had, oh, we'll go up this season. Whereas for Leeds, which is why the fan base is going to be even more nervy, if we don't go up, we lose half the squad. Financially, it's not great again. And then we are in this sticky situation where we're going to have to rebuild, and then we might be looking at a few more seasons in the Championship, which the fan base dread after having to spend 16 years out of the top flight in the first place. So I think there'll be a goal in the first 10 minutes, I think, is what I feel.
Who goes through?
The problem is, like, I'm usually the most confident person, overly confident of Leeds. Like, historically, like, even when we had, like, David Hockaday in charge, I'm like, you know what? We could maybe get to the playoffs. But then you get in the playoffs. And the last time was because it was different because we had Bielsa and we didn't go through with him. But, like, it was like, oh, we'll be fine. Just feels like... I feel
do
like
or die.
Yes, do or die. I think we go through just. I think Ellen Road, but I really hope it more just from, like, it's not even blind naivety. We finished 17 points ahead of you, but if it's the biggest gap ever, and now it's a statistic, obviously we won't go through because it's like the most Leeds thing ever. It's like, oh, you finished 17 points clear and you bottled it still. Leeds are falling apart again. If I have to hear that, oh. I think we go through.
Okay. Definitely.
No. How do you feel about it?
Yeah, I'm probably with you. I'm finding it difficult over 2 legs. In many ways, if this was one-off, I'd feel better about Norwich, if that makes sense, because it's a one-off game, anything can happen. But over 2 legs, and I think Norwich have seen it in the playoffs before. I mean, the most recent experience for Norwich in the playoffs was that 2-legged one against Ipswich in 2015, where they went on to win it. And in the end, it was about Norwich had the better squad. Norwich won over 2 legs, and that was really how it went. So from experience, it feels like that should play out here. But for all the reasons you've mentioned, I think there's going to be nervousness in both sets of fans. So it's going to be really interesting to see how it goes.
Yeah, just bring it on. I'm so ready now. I'm really ready.
Yeah, good man. Well, thank you very much for joining us. Thank you very much for your insight, of course. We want to hear your score predictions as well for the first leg, and also who you feel is going to go through the tie. And then, of course, we'll be at Carrow Road Sunday for the big game. Thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you again very soon.